Welcome to the Lawyer's View. This show should be really called Confessions of an Honest Lawyer, because what we do here is basically it's the no spin zone, just like they have on TV. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what lawyers won't tell you. We're going to talk about the inside scoop about the courts, about what lawyers are thinking, and about the judges, because in the end, they're the ones that make all the decisions that create either pleasure or havoc in our lives when we're going through courts. And the main thing we want to do is dispel that type of idea that Shakespeare said, kill all the lawyers, because that's not what he was talking about. What Shakespeare was talking about in Henry VI was he was talking about the integrity of lawyers. And when you have a society, you want to make sure that the lawyers are not there because they bring justice and integrity to society. So what we want to do is we want to get the inside scoop of how lawyers think, of what the judges are doing, and exactly what's going on in our courts today. Today, we're going to be talking about judges, because in the end, it doesn't matter if you're in Oakland County or Macomb County or any of the surrounding counties. The judges, if you're in court, they're the ones that create and make decisions in our lives. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what do we want to see in a judge? What do we want to have that judge do in our case, but with the lawyers? Do we want them to be honest? Do we want to have integrity? We want to talk about what exactly we want to see in the lawyers. And we have some great guests here today. We have a very experienced guest who I've known for many years, Nunzio Provenzano, who's had thousands of family cases. Good to see you, Nunzio.
Good to see you.
And we have Kathy Greenberg, who's one of the most experienced Oakland County family lawyers here. And we're good to see you too, Kathy.
Nice to see you.
So that's what I want to get down to right now. You know, when we, in all our years of practicing, we always say, you know, it all depends on what judge we get, depending on the case. Nunzio, what do you look for when you have some family law case, especially in Macomb? What are you looking for when you get a case and you get a judge? What kind of judge are you looking for?
Well, it's important that the judge be one of the judges that wants to make a decision and instead of keep referring things off and putting things off. Because in family law, you know, a lot of times people are not happy, they're upset, they're uptight, and time becomes a real concern.
Right.
And
they got kids. They want to make some decisions.
They don't want to wait to have things referred, and they like a decision to be made. And a lot of times you find that, you know, some judges, they don't want to, you know, either they feel they need to, they're going to make a mistake, or they don't take their life experiences. They have to refer to a bunch of other people, associates,
well, like the
in the front of
referees,
the courts, the referees,
yeah.
yes, and interview, and it takes a lot of time. And if judges, I'd like to see judges, and there's plenty of good ones in all three, you know, the three counties that will do that, and that's what I'd like to see.
Kathy, did you find that in Oakland County, that they do that, if there's any delays and they really should be making it quicker, especially because, you know, sometimes you just don't need the 6 month or the year to take through on a regular divorce?
Well, my first important question when I file a divorce is, as I'm standing in the clerk's office, is who's my judge?
Right.
Having practiced, I'm over 31 years.
Right. I don't want to hear how long you are.
Yeah, neither do I. But what I'm saying is you get to know their idiosyncrasies.
Yeah.
So you know which ones are going to take and drag their feet. You know which ones that will make a decision. But traditionally in Oakland County, when you file a motion, they won't do anything because you're asking ex parte, it's called.
Right.
They make you file a motion.
But, you know, when you file the original case, you can't pick your judge.
No, you cannot.
I mean, because people would love to do that. Wouldn't you get a client say, oh, man, I want this judge. I want this specific one because I know I've heard they're easy on women, or I hear they're great with husbands. But you don't get to do that, do you?
No, you don't. And that's why the first question I ask is, who's my judge?
Right.
And then I'll know what kind of motions I need to file and which ones will be granted right off the bat and which one will be referred.
But you know, when we have judges, it doesn't really matter if it's a family law case or a criminal case. You know, what are we looking for in terms of with the judge? For instance, you know what I want? I want a judge that is going to be able to talk to me, that will go into chambers with me and the other side, and they'll discuss it. The kind of, I hate You tell me if you disagree. I hate when a judge is doing everything, not just by the book, but won't tell you what they're thinking. They won't tell you, listen, we see that your client is doing this. Maybe we can work out something this way. And they won't help you in the case at all.
No, I agree with you, but I think that for the most part in the Tri-County, I mean, I've been practicing not quite 31 years, but 25, and I have been in a lot of chambers and do a lot of talking to judges, and most of them will do that. I mean, they want to know where you're going too as the lawyer. They want to know, are you going to file a bunch of motions? They talk to the other counsel. Are you guys going to be able to work some things out?
No.
Where are we going? I agree with you wholeheartedly. That helps the process, and not only that, it helps the clients because in today's economy where it's difficult, for them to bear the fees and costs and things like that. When a judge can help like that and we get direction, it's
Right.
much better. It streamlines it. It helps out, and it's always welcome in my book.
It also gives you the ability to advise your client when you know which way the judge is leaning. And again, saves money, saves time, and gives you more ability to wiggle.
Well, the judge will say he's giving an advisory opinion.
Right.
So
No, they won't give you the decision in the...
making an advisory opinion. But if your ears are open and you're listening, you're correct.
But that
you
doesn't
can,
make
you can
it-
advise your client.
And that makes a big difference, too, is the lawyer's relationship with the judge. And I don't just mean if they're personal friends and going golfing. I'm just not saying that. I'm saying, it gets back to what we were talking about, the mistake of how people talk about Shakespeare and kill the lawyers, is a lawyer's reputation, not just with the community, but with the bench, makes a lot of difference. Because if I'll tell something to a judge and he believes me because I've been in front of him many times, it's not just because I'm friends, but he'll trust that I'll be honest about what's going on with the client. They have a substance abuse issue and I'll be honest with them about it. Or if something's going on, they're going to believe it in the future. And they'll remember if you actually tried to pull the wool over their eyes.
Again, it's the lawyer has to communicate with the judge communicates with the lawyer if that's what he wants. Let's cut to the chase is what he's saying. Again, it helps move things, keeps things focused. And I think that what you were saying about judges being friends, and we go to fundraisers,
Well, they're lawyers. They're just
and
lawyers.
they're lawyers, and we see that. But I don't know too many judges that take that real far, and I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I like the integrity that, okay, so we're buddies. You're wrong, and I'm ruling
Right.
the way I'm supposed to because this is what the law is. And that's, most judges are quite good. So I think our, Oakland County Bar, Macomb, Wayne County Bar, they're really pretty good at that. I mean, I believe that that's the way it should be.
I agree. I think the word integrity, I think when you approach both sides as a judge or a litigant with integrity, how often do you hear from your client, well, I hear the other side's attorney's friends with a judge. My normal, knowing the judge, knowing the system, so?
Yeah. I know the judge, too.
Right, so?
And even when we say go back in the chambers, it doesn't mean they're going to rule your way. I just want to make sure that they're taking the time to listen to both sides on it. And sometimes they're on the bench. They got lots of different cases. It seems to a client, too, boy, the judge might not even have read it. Do you find that at all? That
Yeah.
sometimes you get a judge who will take the time to go through everything, and other judges, they really don't.
No, they don't, and that becomes a problem. For as much as I like to compliment, the benches in the counties, there are occasions when that happens, and it is frustrating because you're spending all this time, and that's when you get a referral or I'll take this under advisement because they haven't taken the time.
They might not be
and then you got to
prepared
tell
to do
your
it.
client what's going on, and they're looking, they're not silly people. I mean, they say, wait a minute, he didn't sound like he knew what was going on. And then you have a whole lot of explaining to do at the end, because of the way the proceeding went. So I agree with you. I just would like to see that. For the most part, it happens, but yes, indeed, there's a number of times
Right.
when it doesn't happen.
There are some famous new cases now that people look at and say, I wonder what was going on with the judge. Even this murder case down in Florida, this Zimmerman where he was accused. It is an interesting case because forget about the facts of the case. I'm just not even talking about the judges. Where the first young judge, she had to recuse herself because she felt that there might have been some implication that because of her husband was a law firm and they had turned down the case, it really wasn't a conflict, but she didn't even want the suggestion just even the smell of impropriety,
Well-
and gave it up. But that goes back to the integrity of a judge. Listen, that would have made her career. That's going to be a worldwide case for a year or more. And she said, you know what? I think this is wrong, and I don't even know what's going on, but I'm going to recuse myself.
Even the appearance of
Right.
an impropriety.
And that's exactly what it was.
And that's good. You know, like you say, it could have been a
She'd be on the pages every single day of the
Every
you know,
day.
quote,
Right.
people, you should be on TV, but
But we get judges that don't sometimes make the best decisions. You know, just in the paper, just in the Free Press, it was the judge down in Wayne County who was taking a picture of himself and giving it to an employee, and it might not even be illegal. It might not be. You know, I know we were talking before the show about sexting or some type of inappropriate Facebook issue. It's not that necessarily. It's just simply, it doesn't smell right. It's the appearance of something that we don't want our judges to do.
What was he thinking?
Well, it's like that Anthony Weiner, you know, sending it
Yeah, exactly.
in Congress. I mean, it's
Exactly.
just, why would they think that that's okay?
And they are supposed to be the role models.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
You're-
agree. He
You're
wasn't
held to a
thinking.
higher level.
Well, I like him. I think he's a great guy. I've been in front of him many, many times. It's just sometimes you question, not just him, but any judge that would not use his head before he'll ask a defendant that. What were you thinking? When you were on probation and you decided to go to that party, and what were you thinking? You should have stayed away. And that's the same kind of issue. Is sometimes you got to be above the fray and above all that.
You have to think before you step.
Right.
And a lot of people don't.
Right. One of the things that I find is that most of the judges, they're pretty good about keeping above the fray. And that's why you don't see many judges in the paper. You know, you have ones that are accused of things like in Downriver. You get things that they're taken away from off the bench, or that are accused of some issue and the Judicial Tenure Committee come in. But that's pretty rare. I mean, you don't really have these judges accused of those kind of bad things. When we come back from the break, what I want to do, I just want to get into some family law. Because I know you both are family attorneys, and both from counties that, quite frankly, have a tremendous amount of young lawyers coming in too. And I want your opinions on whether or not you think that is a good thing for the practice, or whether or not you think that somehow there are too many lawyers coming, especially into family law. And when we come back, we're going to get to that and maybe some other questions. Stay tuned.
Don't walk. Don't walk. Walk. Do not enter. Hot dogs. Definitely like hot dogs. Motorcycle club. Everything must go. Ghostly ghouls. Don't look at that, Teddy. Body piercing. Ouch.
Everyday moments can become
got that
teaching
right,
moments
buddy.
because learning starts long before school does. Give your child the start they need at bornlearning.org.
Welcome back. We're here with Nunzio Provenzano, one of the best attorneys in Macomb County, and Kathy Greenberg, one of the most experienced here in Oakland County. You know, one of the things we were talking about, you guys, is the new influx of attorneys coming in. Listen, your daughter's coming out of law school too. There are so many lawyers coming in, and yet there's just so much, quite frankly, people to represent. And what I want to get to, especially in family law, because it really is a specialty. I mean, you have to know what you're doing. It is complicated dealing with referees. And do you think that the influx of lawyers coming out of law school, it helps or it hurts, especially family lawyers, whether it's in Macomb or in Oakland?
do you mean from a business standpoint? Or are you just
Yeah.
talking about
You know, I don't mean the business-
from the quality of lawyers
I mean,
that are out there?
training-wise, because they got to spend the time in the courts
Yeah.
to be able to get trained too.
Everybody feels that it's the easiest thing to do. Let's start with that.
Yeah.
And
Oh, but it's not.
it's not. And the other problem, with the bigger problem I see, is the improper people.
Right.
That they all want to represent themselves. The courts bend over backwards, and the courts bend over backwards for the new attorneys. And you're sitting there saying, like, okay.
Right, because, you know, the economy went to the crapper. Nobody has any money to hire lawyers, or at least not a lot, to spend to go to the courts. And so are the courts encouraging people
Yes.
to go without lawyers with it?
Yes.
Well, and then they tell them,
What do they say?
You have got to, if you're going to represent yourself, we're going to hold you to the standard that we hold a lawyer to. You're going to have to know the court rules. You're going to have to know the rules of evidence. So you get it on both sides. It's just that I think that so many areas of laws in the state of Michigan, like your products liability, a couple other areas of law like the employment law have all gone away because of laws that have happened, and people are filtering themselves to family law.
So like in malpractice, it's so hard to sue in this state now with the level that you have to reach to be able to have a malpractice case, let's say, that so many of those lawyers, and in personal injury too, because it's such a conservative state now in our Supreme Court, that it means that so many of those lawyers, quite frankly, are moving to different areas. You know, I've been a criminal lawyer for over 20 years, not quite as long as you, but almost 20 years, over 20 years, and it is where a lot of those young lawyers are coming in too. But family law, I want to get back to that because, you know, there's an interesting case. It's actually John Edwards' case, and we talked about it a little, where John Edwards, who ran for president, is now being prosecuted for something that has nothing to do with family law. But because he was taking money to take care of a out-of-wedlock child, it becomes sort of a paternity case. And I was talking to a judge about it the other day, and that is, I want to know why it is that when you have a family law case and you have a husband or a wife that are fooling around, that it doesn't make it a more complicated case. For instance, can you get more alimony because of that case? What happens with the cases?
The law is, not to jump in, but technically the law is irreconcilable differences. That's what grants you a divorce.
But I thought it's no fault. I thought it doesn't matter.
That's a no fault. But so then the next question is, was the family funds used to support the affair or the out-of-wedlock child?
So if someone comes in and they say, listen, I want my wife's been fooling around. I know she's fooling around. I want to get a divorce, but I don't want to have to pay her as much child support. I don't want to have to pay her alimony. Did they take that into account when that mess was going on during the marriage?
Fault comes into play in property settlement. When they say no fault in Michigan, they're talking about you don't have to have the traditional grounds for divorce, that there were these inappropriate either affairs, gambling, drugs. You don't need to show that in order to get a divorce. It's simply whether there was a breakdown of the marital relationship to the extent that the objects of matrimony have been destroyed, and there's no likelihood that the two can stay together. I mean, now you don't have to find grounds. That's all you need, irreconcilable differences like that movie years ago. But fault comes into play in property settlement. It comes in custody. It comes in alimony awards. So yes, it does play a bit of a part.
But you know, we were talking about how complicated it can be to either represent yourself or to have a young lawyer who, quite frankly, hasn't been through the court system. I mean, you have to do child support. You have to figure that out. You have to do pensions. You have to, you have to figure out some complicated issues. How does someone do that when they're not represented by a lawyer?
And you also have to have the background knowledge in figuring out child support, what you call the custody, so that the support, you get the ultimate amount of support. Or, on the other hand, you are able to pay the lesser amount of support. Yeah, there's many tricks of the trade.
Yeah, you know, with the new way they figure out child support, it's not just based on ability to pay needs of the child, it's also overnights. So now you have these people jockeying for overnights, and as a result of that, you have custody battles when custody battles should not be initiated. You know, judges are trying and referees are trying to say, listen, I mean, come on, who was the primary caretaker? And, you know, they'll challenge you, but, you know, you give the people their fair day in court, they're going to say, all right, let's refer it to the front of court, and there goes a big chunk of time, a big chunk of money, and it holds up things.
Front of the court is a whole different discussion because I've never heard anybody say they like the front of the court. And they, I'm sure, are trying to be as fair as possible, but they call them the fiend of the court.
Well, you know, like you're saying, Scott, I don't know, but you know how you're saying that times are really tough and everything? You know, a lot of family problems, it's unfortunate, but, you know, the money and family problems happen. It's it's almost as, as popular, I don't want to say it that way, but like criminal law, they are lots of cases. I mean, I think one of the cases I was on today, where are we at, in March? I mean, we're into 2000s already in Macomb County. It's been up there. So by the end of the year, or we're in April here.
For divorces.
And, for divorces that have been filed already. So, I mean, it's happening a lot. So when you say, are there enough lawyers out there? I guess they're moving along, but...
Enough cases for the amount of lawyers coming out? No?
It depends on quality and quantity. Go ahead.
We've been fortunate enough to probably be around a lot. We get word of mouth.
Word of mouth.
But you get referrals on it.
Right.
Referrals.
But you see so much advertising too, especially the kids, in law school too. They're teaching, obviously, the marketing for it too. And when someone is marketing as a lawyer, they really have to be careful. They have to know what they're talking about on that specific.
Because you can be held to your advertisement.
That's exactly right. You're held to what you should do. We actually, speaking of the website, we have some questions that people have asked, and so I'm going to bring it up with you.
Sure.
One of them is a very interesting question that I don't know the answer to, and I want to ask you about it. Is, Kathy, are there any rights that grandparents can have in the state of Michigan over grandchildren? Because I get that all the time. I'm a criminal lawyer, and I get that where someone will lose their rights, whether it's parental rights, or they'll go to jail, or something happen, and now the grandparents want to come in. So what do? Can grandparents have rights in Michigan?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but their rights stem from their alive children. If your child is now deceased, then you can petition for grandparents' rights. But if your child is alive, then your rights stem from your children.
Do you agree?
Yeah, I do, and that's usually what happens. If a child does not allow the extended family to visit with the child, the grandchild, or the niece or nephew, they don't get to file and have their own separate time.
Yeah.
You will see your niece or nephew or grandchild when your family member has their parenting time. But if they're...
It allows it. It allows it.
But if they're in jail or they're deceased and the former daughter or son-in-law just refuse, it's judges like to have extended family, and they like to have grandparents involved.
Yeah, they don't want to put them in
children's
foster
lives.
care, right?
Well, that's a different issue.
That's a different issue.
That's a neglect issue.
Yeah.
We're saying if it's a divorce issue, or even if it isn't.
Post-judgment, that...
Well, even if the parties are still married, the husband and wife are married, the grandparent cannot petition for rights to their children. If their kids that are alive and tending to their children decide you'll have no contact, you'll have no contact.
But why is it that the courts always... I've had so many clients that, quite frankly, they shouldn't be keeping the parental rights. You talk about termination, they're on drugs, they're having issues, and yet it still always seems that the referees, the judges, are still tending to say, we want to give them back to the parents. We want to put them through parental contracts, parenting contracts, and as opposed to, is the foster care system so bad that they don't want to put them with a family that says, we want this child. We're not on drugs. We're not, abusing. We're not doing anything like that.
Well, the goal for neglect cases is reunification of the family. So the resources are all directed to getting the family, the parents, help. Now, if there's a termination, then family members are the first ones considered, rather than the foster care system.
But I've had it where, and this is actually the next question from Shelley P. She says, my husband has a domestic violence case against her, and she's filing and I'm filing for divorce. Can I use that to get my child? So will the judges on the divorce case take into account, let's say, an abusive father, an abusive parent, and take that child away from them?
The Michigan compiled laws, the statute is 722.23. When it comes to a custody issue, they want to decide this in the best interest of the child. And one of, I don't know if it's sub K or...
Yeah, it's one of the ones on the...
It says they consider domestic violence. You don't want... It's not a good thing, especially, and they always ask, did you do this in front of the children? Not that it's better that you're doing it behind closed doors. I'm just saying, but
isn't that like how many times have you beat your wife this week?
No.
It's a yes or no question.
What I'm saying to you is, it is a consideration for
But it's
custody,
one of
as
the things
she's
that-
asking. It's one of the,
Yes. One of the weighted issues.
Yeah.
and it could be held against the party, clearly.
Can it be held, we were talking about before about child support, not just the custody, but are you ever awarded more money because it's a abusive spouse or they're doing more abuse?
Well,
or even an alimony, can you get more if they're...
Well, now in
if they're
Michigan, I mean, you can file along with the divorce case an assault and battery case. A case
civil
for
case,
a
civil case.
well,
Yeah.
the divorce is civil, so they allow you to
right.
add the, well, I didn't mean it that way, but
Yeah.
it's an equitable case. But you can have a law case for intentional infliction of emotional distress, assault and battery. I mean,
Right.
I've
Some
filed
civil
them myself.
cases.
I've had to defend some of them myself. So yes, you can do that.
I've had
But
hundreds...
that's awarded outside the divorce itself.
Right, that's something
Yeah, that's a
totally different, a
tot-
different action.
Different action.
But I've had hundreds and hundreds of assault and battery cases and domestic violence cases, and in every single one, if there's a divorce going on, we're always concerned that he's going to either plead guilty and they can use that against him in the custody matter, or that he's afraid of being sued. And yet, when we're in court, that complainant, let's just say it's the woman, is sitting there and she's not telling that to the judge. I mean, she's not saying, "Oh, I want to go forward with it," and she's not even bringing up any issue with the custody. Do you know what I mean? So it seems like it plays if there's different cases going on, a criminal case, let's say, and a custody case going on. For instance, would you say that you should use the same lawyer for both? Would you? Because there has to be some coordination with that, because they affect each other.
Well, it
that
depends on-
domestic violence case is going to affect the custody
It
case.
depends on the degree of the criminal case while the divorce is going on. If it's a domestic violence case, a possession of marijuana, simple possession, a 90-day misdemeanor, these are not difficult cases if you've been experienced. So it's very possible that can happen. I know quite a few lawyers that are in the district courts. I see them, because I do criminal law too. I see them, and they're doing domestic violence cases, and I know they're on the divorce, because I'm on the other side of the divorce case
Right.
from them. So I know they're doing that, because it's not, so it can be done. But if it's a major felony or something more complicated, then sure, you always want to make sure that you have the right lawyer.
Well, I always say a divorce case only starts it spreads out rapidly in some divorces,
Yeah.
as to your criminal, as to your civil,
Well, but that really gets back to, you need a good lawyer. You need a lawyer who knows what they're doing. You need a lawyer, for instance, I think, that really has a tremendous amount, especially in family law we're talking about, that knows the system, that has been there for many years. And if you're going to use a young lawyer, that's okay, but many times use a young lawyer that might be associated with another serious or another senior attorney, because that can make a lot of the difference.
well, you have to know what cases come out of these.
Right.
Just like you said, you could.
You could have probate issues. Like, what if somebody during the divorce loses a parent, they have inheritances coming? I mean, there's laws on that. What happens? There's a number of things that
Well,
can
the
go on.
probate is another issue. We'll do that at another time. We want to thank you guys both for coming on the show, Kathy Greenberg and Nunzio Provenzano, here on Lawyer's View. We're going to come back next week with a session that we're probably going to talk about the probate cases. Thanks for watching.